7 skills every man needs in life. Nobody warned Trevor that turning 35 would feel like standing in the middle of a highway with no idea which direction to run. Good income, his own apartment, a gym bag he actually used. And yet, sitting across from his girlfriend at dinner one night, completely unable to explain why he felt so disconnected from everything, he realized something that genuinely unsettled him. He had been so focused on building a life that he never learned how to actually live inside one. Here on Brutal Relationship, we talk about the stuff most channels skip. The raw, uncomfortable truths about what it actually takes to grow into the kind of man you respect when you look in the mirror. This video is one of those conversations, because life will pile on the responsibilities, the bills, the expectations, the relationships, and it just assumes you arrived with the tools already packed. Most men didn't get that bag. And the longer you wait to build these skills, the more expensive that gap becomes. Not just financially, but in ways that are much harder to measure. 7 skills. Every man needs them, and the clock has been running since the day you were born. Skill 1. Emotional regulation. The real kind, not the shutdown kind. 2 guys. Same car accident on the way to work. Nothing serious, just a fender scrape that made them both 20 minutes late to an important meeting. The first one walks in already unraveling, voice sharp, body tight, and spends the next 4 hours making decisions he'll quietly regret. The second one walks in 5 minutes after him, sits down, and somehow operates like the morning never happened. Same situation. Completely different internal wiring. What most men were taught, either directly or just by watching the men around them, is that handling emotions means stuffing them somewhere out of sight. Go quiet, go cold, disappear into work or a screen or a drink until whatever you were feeling loses its volume. That got called toughness for generations. But here's what that model actually produces. Suppressed emotion doesn't vanish. It relocates. It shows up as an overreaction to something small, a chronic low-level irritability that confuses the people close to you, a body that's running on stress hormones it was never designed to sustain indefinitely. The man who never learned to process what he feels doesn't become numb. He becomes a pressure cooker with no release valve. Emotional regulation is something entirely different. It's the gap between feeling something and acting on it. That gap, even if it's only a few seconds wide, is where your actual judgment lives. Neuroscience backs this up in a real way. When a strong emotion fires, your brain enters a stress state that physically reduces your capacity for rational thought. The part of your brain responsible for good decisions essentially steps aside while the survival mode circuitry takes over. Men who never develop. Regulation skills spend their most important moments in relationships, at work, in conflict, operating from that compromised state without even realizing it. The shift isn't about becoming less emotional. It's about becoming the one who steers the emotion rather than the one being steered by it. Try this now. The next time something spikes your stress or anger, say the emotion out loud to yourself, even just in your head. I'm frustrated right now. That single act of labeling fires up your reasoning brain and starts pulling you back into the driver's seat. Then wait 90 seconds before you respond to anything. That window is enough to change the entire outcome. Skill 2. Financial intelligence. Because ignorance has a price tag. Same salary. 2 men, 10 years pass. One of them owns property, sleeps without that tight chest feeling at the end of the month, and has quietly been building something in the background. The other one is still wondering where his money goes, wanting still one unexpected expense away from a crisis, and still telling himself he'll start saving when things calm down. Things never calm down. That's not how money works. What nobody explains clearly enough is that financial literacy isn't about becoming obsessed with wealth. It's about not being controlled by the absence of it. There's a particular kind of stress that comes from financial confusion, and it bleeds into every other area of your life. Your confidence, your relationships, the decisions you make from desperation instead of clarity. Now, here's something most financial content glosses over completely. The math of money is actually straightforward once you learn it. The harder problem is the psychology underneath the math. Most men carry invisible money beliefs they absorbed before they were old enough to question them. That wealth is somehow morally suspect, that talking about money is uncomfortable, that wanting more makes you greedy. Those unexamined beliefs quietly steer financial behavior for decades without anyone ever realizing it. There are three foundations worth understanding first. The gap between an asset and a liability. An asset puts money into your pocket over time, a liability drains it, and most men spend their prime earning years collecting liabilities while calling them rewards. The compounding effect of time, starting late, isn't the end of the world, but every year you delay costs you a multiple that pure discipline can never fully recover. And the psychology of your actual spending, not what you think you spend, but what your bank statement actually says when you look honestly at 30 days of transactions. The move to make. Track your real spending for 1 month without judgment, not to punish yourself, just to see clearly. Then identify one thing you can automate towards savings or investment, even if the amount feels embarrassingly small. The habit you're building matters far more than the initial dollar amount. Skill 3. Communication that actually lands. Ryan spent 20 minutes explaining something to his partner that felt crystal clear in his own head. She heard something completely different. He walked out of the room, convinced she just didn't want to understand. She walked out convinced he didn't care enough to explain properly. Both of them were wrong. Both of them went to bed frustrated. That gap between what you mean and what someone else receives is one of the most quietly destructive forces in a man's life. The common assumption is that communication is just talking. You say words, they hear the words. The exchange is complete. But genuine communication is a transfer of internal experience, not just vocabulary. The emotional state behind your words shapes everything about how they land. Tension, defensiveness, or disconnection in your body communicates before your mouth opens, and it overrides whatever you actually say. There's also the listening side, which almost nobody does as well as they think. Real listening isn't staying quiet while mentally preparing your next point. It's genuinely suspending your own perspective long enough to actually enter someone else's reality. It's following up with a question before offering an answer. It's letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. And one of the most practically useful shifts any man can make, learning to express a need rather than assign a blame. "You never show up for me" lands as an attack and triggers defense. "I've been feeling like I'm handling everything alone lately" opens a door. Same core frustration, completely different conversation that follows. What works in practice? In your next high-stakes conversation, lead with one question before you make any statement. One genuine, curious question. Then actually wait for the full answer before you respond. Notice how differently people open up when they feel genuinely heard rather than just tolerated. Skill 4. Physical. Discipline. The keystone that holds everything else. When Andre started training consistently at 29, the first thing he expected to notice was physical change. And yes, that came. But the thing that surprised him, the thing he didn't anticipate at all, was that his anxiety dropped significantly within weeks. His focus at work sharpened. He stopped second-guessing himself in conversations. The general low-grade tension he had carried for years without naming it started to lift. He hadn't changed his job, his apartment, or anything external. He had changed his relationship with his own body. This is the piece that gets reduced to aesthetics when it's actually about something far deeper. When you train physically with regularity, you're not just building muscle. You're managing your own neurochemistry. Testosterone, dopamine, cortisol, serotonin. These aren't gym chemicals. They are the literal biological foundation of your confidence, your mood, your resilience, and your capacity to handle pressure. Every man who trains consistently is actively influencing his mental and emotional state in a way that no passive habit can replicate. And there's a psychological dimension beyond the biochemistry. Every time you show up to train when you don't feel like it, and you will not always feel like it, you send your nervous system a message. You are someone who does hard things by choice. That message compounds over months and years into a self-image that is genuinely different from the man who always defaults to comfort. Consistency is the variable that matters most. Not the perfect program, not the ideal routine. The man who trains 3 times a week for 3 years with an average plan will always outperform the man who chases optimal protocols and quits when life gets inconvenient. The minimum standard, 3 sessions a week, 45 minutes each. Protect that schedule the way you'd protect a non-negotiable appointment. Don't optimize it yet. Just make it unbreakable first. Skill 5. Bouncing back, handling failure without losing the plot. James built something for 2.5 years, a business he believed in, that he had poured money and time and genuine identity into, and it didn't make it. The market shifted, the timing was wrong, the execution had gaps. The specific reason almost doesn't matter. What matters is what happened next. For about 14 months, James let that failure become a story. He told himself about what kind of man he was. Not unlucky, not inexperienced, fundamentally not good enough, and that story kept him from starting anything new, from taking any real risk, from investing in anything that mattered. Because the thought of feeling that way again was worse than the original failure. That story cost him more than the business ever did. Now pay attention to what's actually happening psychologically in that kind of situation, because it's more common than most men acknowledge. Failure only becomes an identity when a man has no framework for processing it as information rather than verdict. Without that framework, every setback becomes a referendum on his worth rather than data about his approach. And men who learned early that mistakes meant something was wrong with them, not just with their strategy. Carry that equation silently for years. The reframe that actually changes this isn't positive thinking, it's precision. After a setback, the question that shifts everything is not, why does this always happen to me? That question is a trap. The question is, what specifically failed and what would I change about the approach? That's it. That moves your brain from threat mode into problem-solving mode every single time. Build this habit now. After any setback, significant or minor, write down one sentence answering that specific question before you do anything else with the experience. Over time, this practice rewires how your brain categorizes difficulty. Not as danger, as data. Skill 6, boundaries, drawing lines, without needing permission. Everyone loved Marcus, reliable, agreeable, always available, never said no. His friends called him first for everything. His family knew he'd show up. His colleagues leaned on him constantly, and Marcus privately felt like he was disappearing. Not because people were taking advantage of him, but because he had never given himself permission to take up space. The version of strength he'd been handed said that real men sacrifice. That need is weakness. That accommodating everyone around you is love. And he wore that version for so long, it started to feel like his actual personality. What gets missed in most conversations about boundaries is that this is fundamentally a self-worth issue, not a communication issue. Men who struggle to set limits usually don't have a vocabulary problem. They have a belief problem, specifically the belief that their own comfort, capacity, and needs are less valid than everyone else's convenience. That belief was installed early and runs silently, and no amount of knowing you should set boundaries will override it until the belief itself changes. There's also something worth sitting with here. Real respect from others isn't built by always saying yes. The people who genuinely respect you are usually the ones who've heard you say no at least once. Because a man who can decline when needed is a man whose agreement means something. People feel that difference even when they can't articulate it. The starting point? Practice the phrase, "that doesn't work for me," in a low-stakes situation this week. No extended explanation, no apology, just that. Let the awkward pause exist without immediately trying to smooth it over. That discomfort is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's the feeling of a new muscle being used for the first time. Skill 7, brotherhood, the connection. Most men are quietly starving for stop for a moment and answer, this honestly. When was the last time you had a real conversation with another man? Not about sports, not about work stress, not venting about something external, but genuinely honest about how you were actually doing. The kind of conversation where something true came out. For a significant number of men watching this, that question requires a long pause. There is a loneliness pattern developing across generations of men that almost nobody is talking about loudly enough. Not the dramatic, obvious kind of loneliness, the quiet kind. The kind where you have people in your life, but nobody who actually knows what's going on inside you. Where connection exists at the surface level and something underneath stays permanently unspoken. Research across multiple fields is consistent on this. Men consistently underestimate how isolated they actually are, and men over 30 frequently struggle to identify even one person they could contact in a genuine personal crisis, not for practical help, but for actual human support. That gap has measurable consequences. Social isolation in men correlates with significantly worse physical health outcomes, higher rates of depression, shorter lifespans, and a chronic low-grade suffering that gets mislabeled as personality or attitude. The conditioning that created this runs deep. Many men absorb the message through watching other men, through culture, through what got rewarded and what got mocked growing up, that needing other people signals weakness, that the ideal man is self-sufficient to the point of requiring nothing from anyone. That image is not strength. It is one of the most effective traps ever built. Real friendship between men isn't constructed in some big emotional moments. It accumulates in small ones, the consistent check-in, the honest answer when someone asks how you're doing instead of the automatic all good, the willingness to be the one who initiates, not because you need something, but because connection requires someone to go first. One action this week. Send a message to one man in your life, not to make plans, not about something logistical, just to ask how he's genuinely doing. And when he gives you the surface answer, follow it with one more question. That second question is the one that actually opens something. Most men are waiting for someone to ask it. Trevor, the guy from the beginning of this video, sitting at that dinner table feeling like a stranger in his own life, eventually figured it out. Not because something outside of him changed, because he started building what was missing: emotional regulation, financial intelligence, communication that connects rather than collides, physical discipline that rewires your identity, the resilience to use failure as fuel, boundaries built on genuine self-respect, and the courage to actually let other men in. None of these are things you either have or you don't. Every single one is a skill. Skills are built through repetition, not revelation. You don't need a perfect moment to start. You need a first step and the consistency to keep walking. The men who look back on their lives with genuine satisfaction aren't the ones who had the most advantages. They're the ones who, at some point, stopped waiting for someone else to hand them the tools and started building them on purpose. You already know what they are. That's not a small thing.